to order. Nikki, can you call the roll?
I can. Vicki Austin is present. Jim Kern.
Present.
Rich Jeffrey is absent. Eric Ekdahl.
Present.
Mike Broseth.
Present.
Teresa Keen. Present. Bill McGuire.
Present.
Terry Montgomery. Is she gone? No. And Phil Vosberg.
So looking for an approval for the agenda for our August 26, 2024 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Mike to approve the agenda for the board meeting for today, August 26, 2024. All those in favor by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. On to consent items. We have to approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting from July 22nd, 2024. Approval of support staff hiring. Tara Mayer, cafeteria worker at the high school. Roseanne DeVoe, custodian at Northside. Catherine Elmer, custodian at Northside. Approval of support staff resignation. Gordon Grunder at the high school. Do you know how long he was there?
I think just under 10 years.
Okay. And then acceptance of community donations. Incredibly thankful and appreciative for our generous community and all their donations. To Jacob Swag for pencil bags for Northside and Abraham Lincoln. Ann Hunter for 32 crocheted lap blankets for our 4K classrooms. To Vince's Pizza for donated certificates for free personal pizza to each student and staff member of the month at the middle school for this upcoming school year. To Dylan McGuire for 7 new winter coats and hats donated to Parkside. The Garden Deli donated certificates for a free malt shake to each staff member of the month at the middle school for the this coming school year. And to Kathy and Jim Krubau for donations of supplies to Parkside. Community member donations through the Monroe Noon Optimists Drive at the local banks and financial institutions provided school supplies again to Parkside. And they provided a $151 check from cash coin donations during their community school supply drive to be used for school supplies, as well as anonymous delivery of backpacks, socks, underwear for their back to school drive. To Shoe Sensation for the donation of backpacks to all elementary schools. For shoes for the elementary students for back to school from the Monroe Morning Optimist, totaling over $2,500. To Katrina Jackson and employees of Cleaver Brooks in Monroe, they donated school supplies from employees. Bob and Linda Cates, donation of money towards supplies. Anonymous delivery of 10 sets of school supplies in backpacks. And to Samantha Arn, customers and employees of Walgreens in Monroe for school supply donations. So again, incredibly grateful and appreciative for our continuous generous community and all of their generous donations. So looking for a motion for the consent agenda.
So second.
Bill and Jim.
Yep. I have a motion by Phil and a second by Jim to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor by voice vote can say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I have no one signed up for public comment. Is there anybody here to make public comment? Yes, and we are on to old business, and we have no old business, so we will move on to new business. And the first item for new business is bid review and approval, and we have 3 areas to be looking at tonight. So I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, so the bids are attached to your board packets with the summary provided by C.G. Schmidt. And so we have Dylan and Tony here from C.G. Schmidt to talk about them. So to note, the waterproofing did come over estimated costs, which we'll address. The other 2 were slightly below estimated cost. So we will let them go ahead and go through this. Tony, what do you want up first, the summary or?
Summary.
Summary, okay. Jen, do you have it? All right, the board does have the bid package summary. So go ahead, Tony.
Basically, to address the waterproofing, we did have two bids, Zander and CM Morris. Zander came in as the low bid. Obviously, we're showing here about $64,000 over budget. Going back to the schematic design budget, we had originally showed waterproofing at the elevators and at the gym area because it was so far below grade. So that was about $90,000 was the original budget. So to account for about that extra $60,000, $65,000, were a couple areas that came into play in bid pack 4, including the precast around the gym and the area C, which is the trades area. Essentially, there was a detail added that had the waterproofing come up onto the precast, which isn't a normal detail that we see. It's usually stopped at the top of the foundation wall. So that accounts for about $20,000. Another added detail, the orchestra pit slab, which you'll see was added at the bottom of the sheet there for about $22,500. That was added as the PAC was not fully designed at the time of the schematic design. So the orchestra pit wasn't a 100% guarantee going in, and with that design unfinished, we didn't have waterproofing details for that area. So that added cost is located in the PFE there. But there's one more, about $20,000. So sheet waterproofing, we had originally figured fluid applied. Fluid applied varies in thickness versus your sheet applied has that given thickness. So when you spray, fluid applied waterproofing, you have to get that thickness approved, and it has to be tested that you actually, sprayed the correct thickness on. So with the detail going up onto the precast, the surfaces are a bit too inconsistent to use spray applied waterproofing. So they elected to go with the sheet waterproofing, which is slightly more expensive, and along with the details, it's not necessarily self-adhered. So there are some termination bar and counter flashing details associated with that sheet waterproofing that you wouldn't have with the fluid applied. So that accounts for about another $20,000. Anyone have any questions regarding that stuff?
While we're talking about waterproofing, we do have a board member that has requested to abstain from the motion for the waterproofing. So maybe what we can do is we can have discussion on this, and if the board wants, we can.
Yep, I was just gonna say, so what we'll do is we'll break this up into 3 separate motions. I know in our board packet it's listed as 1, but so that Mike can abstain, we'll break it up into 3 separate motions. So we'll have any discussion or questions on the waterproofing.
For the orchestra pit, Dylan, we had talked about, it was partly because of the lift too, is that accurate? Is that part of that, or is that part of a different discussion? I can't remember.
That's part of a different discussion.
Different one, okay, it was just the,
I think early on, there wasn't 100% certainty that there'd be a pit, but with the pit being right next to the elevator shaft, the elevator pit and the orchestra pit are kind of at the same elevation. And we're doing waterproofing both underneath of the elevator foundation up the sides. So we figured I'd better do the same thing at the orchestra pit, which is right adjacent at the same elevation. So we talked to PRA about it a little bit. It's one of those things that came to light from our bidders, because both of our bidders priced that as an alternate price. So when we got on the phone with PRA right away and talked about if that's truly needed or not, and they made the decision that it is a good idea to do that right now. You only got one time to get the waterproofing right. Obviously, it's not something you can add on later, so they felt more comfortable proceeding with that in that location.
Teresa, just for my clarification, do we need all 3 separate, or can waterproofing be pulled out and the other 2 be done together? Just so I can start writing.
They could, but I'm thinking if we're pulling one out, let's just do all 3 separate.
Okay.
I think it'll be cleaner. Questions, discussions about waterproofing?
So the recommendation, even though it's significantly over budget, the recommendation is to proceed. Because it wasn't, one of the previous bids, when it came back that they were over, we decided to kind of do something different. Rather, we kind of combine the package with something else. So can you guys just help me understand why are you recommending we proceed over budget in this instance, whereas I think in a previous instance, we decided to kind of wait and combine different packages together?
Order of magnitude on this one isn't quite as significant as those other ones, for one. some of the design developed here, so, some of this stuff grew as a part of that design development. We do have one thing kind of on the table here, but we didn't want to necessarily bring it to light because we're not sure if we can deduct it or not, but that area where the trades or I forget the proper term, but the tech ed department, it's reduced down 4 feet from the rest of the slab, so we have waterproofing on that too, because there's earth behind that could leak into there. But after further discussion with PRA, actually just this afternoon, they said we can maybe get away without doing that. So there is potential. How much was that?
810.
8 to 10 grand, where we can try to peel some of that savings back and try to recover it. But also, these are two of the major players that we see bidding waterproofing all the time. I don't think I've hired anybody else for waterproofing besides one of these two, I don't think, or at least in my most recent career.
Not in
So
this area, no.
it's not like we're gonna get a different, more competitive number. I think the dollars are more related to the scope and how maybe we're a little bit off on what our estimate of what the scope was at the beginning versus what it is now.
Thanks.
And I think just to prepare you, I think going forward with the rest of bid package 4, there's a lot of different components in bid package 4, and some areas are gonna be under and some are gonna be over, and so I think this will probably not be out of the norm.
Correct.
And in general, you probably all know this, but in general, from schematic design to the level of design that we're at, inherently we're adding scope as we go. The schematic design estimates try to take into account what will be added as details are added and things are refined in meetings and certain questions are asked and finally answered and all of the things that tighten up the details inherently will add scope, just because we know the building, we see the building more clearly at that point. And so back at schematic design, which we're saying is on budget or off budget, a lot of those things are assumed, and as we dial it down, maybe some of those assumptions that the whole group was thinking about back then took a left turn during design, because it makes a lot more sense to go this way with something. And so there's going to be some of those adjustments, like Ron was saying, that will ebb and flow with if we're above or below that schematic design estimate per trade, per division of the budget. We're just gonna get a little bit of fluctuation as we go, and it's very normal, I guess, in that sense, with a project of this size.
So I think possibly for the board, it might be helpful then to, because he's right, it is very normal, right? And that's what that contingency that we saw, is for, right? So it might be helpful for us to see as we go along, where are we with that contingency funding? Has that been pulled down and we're starting to draw over budget, or are we staying under that contingency?
Not yet. So what we haven't set the GMP yet because of the bid package approach that we've gone through. And so we're right now working our way through bid package 4. And then there's a 5th bid package, much smaller bid package for landscaping and miscellaneous. There's a few other things in there, but it's relatively small, definitely compared to bid package 4. Bid package 4 is the big one. And so as we work through that and we can finally get to a point where there's a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, that's when the budget gets locked in, and then we start working on contingencies at that point. So once we lock that in, at that point, there's an owner contingency and then there's a construction contingency, and depending on the reason why a price fluctuated, will be drawn out of one of those contingencies or the other once we lock in on that guaranteed maximum price. We're just working towards that still, and we will be there soon. We're just not there yet because of the kind of the process in which we're doing it.
Is bid pack 5 the last one?
Bid pack 5 is the last one.
That's mostly landscaping.
And it is the last one on purpose because it's an effort that will be put into place physically way down the road, like landscaping and those things. But before, think of it as the building. So I think it's maybe a little slightly generic way of looking at it, but think of it as, we're talking about the building now. Before we were talking about components to get to the building, then we're the building, and then it's the components after the building are in bid package 5.
So Teresa, do you want to complete discussion on this?
Yes.
And then look for the motion and then?
Yep.
Okay, and then go to the next piece?
Correct. Any other, go ahead.
So I'll motion to approve Zander, or award Zander the waterproofing bid.
So I have a motion to approve the waterproofing bid to Zander. Any discussion? I guess I need a second. Second by Phil. Now any discussion? So I have a motion by Jim, a second by Phil to approve the waterproofing contract to Zander as presented. All those in favor by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Mike abstained from that one.
Yep.
And Mike abstained. Thank you. Mike abstained from that. All right, let's move on to doors, frames, and hardware.
Yes, I'll be handling the next two. So doors, frames, and hardware, we got 3 bids, one from Block Iron and Supply, one from LaForest, and one from Builders Hardware. Those are the usual 3 bidders we see in this category. Sometimes we'll get 1 or 2 from some other like lumber yards, but this is too big for a door and hardware scope to come out of like a lumber yard, for example. So this is who I would expect to see bids from. We did have to do a little bit of work to get things apples to apples on this scope, hence the kind of pluses and minuses. Trying not to get into too detail, but one bidder had, aluminum frames, when really that's by the glass and glazing contractor, which is gonna be presented next time. So, and then the outbuildings, as we're going through this, we're also finding that the outbuildings that were a part of bid package 2 and 3, some of the finishes and some of the items in a part of those, some of the bidders are missing that. So we're being thorough in that process to make sure that we're capturing the full scope and we get that included. So after things were all apples to apples, we have 2 PFEs there. One's for automatic operators, so there are 7. Sometimes what we'll do is sometimes we'll have the door and hardware suppliers supply that themselves. Sometimes we'll get it from the glass and glazing contractor, but in this scope we have, I don't want the school to potentially have 2 different auto operator suppliers and 2 different service contracts to go with. So we just pulled it out of the numbers and we created it as a PFE, and we're gonna bid that out separately. We have 2 numbers that both come in right around that $25,000 mark. So we'll just let that loose when the time comes for that. And then item number 2 down there is $50,000, it's a pretty beefy one. This came up during scope review, just about some fire rated frames and the uncertainty if the frames need to be rated to meet this specific ASTM standard. It's something new. And at the time I was uncertain if it needed to happen after further discussion with, at the time of putting this together. I was uncertain if it needed to happen, so I created a PFE for it. Further after that, PRA did confirm that we do need to do that. It's 2 of the big glass windows that go into the gymnasium, so they are pretty important for viewing. You don't want to restrict that view, and I think it's still better than, doing the alternate route, which would be doing like all shutters, fire shutters, and really, a lot of maintenance associated with that and testing and things of that nature. So that's what those 2 big chunks of money are there, just because I'm sure they jumped out at you. But aside from that, I have no issue, proceeding with Block Iron on this. Any questions on doors and hardware?
Where's the big variance?
Big variance on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really.
It is, and I walked through, I counted all the doors myself. I went through all the quantities to double check, and they're all lined up. It was way off, and I think it was even further off before I had the add to Block Iron and the deduct from LaForest, so it brought them tighter. So you can imagine when I first saw it, I was like, what's going on? But I walked through the whole scope, and I couldn't find anything that was not apples to apples after I got through this process. So I do know that Block Iron was really interested in the project. So I don't know if they were just ultra aggressive. Maybe the other ones weren't. Not sure.
Yeah, we work with Block Iron and LaForce. It seems like it's one or the other, right, when it comes to the school projects. So a lot of times schools will, because they have a relationship with one another, have a preference over one or the other. But I don't see a service or quality issue between either one. I think it makes a lot of sense that price is the driving factor in this one, especially since all the effort that CG Schmidt put in for leveling the bids and scoping out everything to make sure that we are apples to apples. We're not just missing a wing of doors or something like that. So, yeah, I take no exception to Block Iron as a provider.
You're comfortable in future, potential
future expenditures, what you budget in there.
Yeah, because I do have, I did end up getting solid numbers for both of those. So yes, I'm comfortable with those. They're right around, give or take a couple thousand, they're right where they need to be. We'll spend that every bit of that.
I think this maybe speaks to some of what you were talking about, like, so while the waterproofing bid maybe was over budget, this one is $145,000 under budget. So we'll just see some variance that way between these different bids.
Yeah, it's worth the time to ask the questions at each line item as you get there, but don't be too worried about the line item itself. Like, get the information that makes you comfortable, but don't let it skew you because, you know, good news is coming as much as sometimes some bad news is coming, and at the end of the day, it comes to a budget. And so, but definitely don't let my words stop you from asking every question you need to ask. I'm just saying that just don't get too emotionally tied up to a number at a certain line item because the next one you may be really excited about. And so,
So I'd make a motion to approve black iron for the doors, frames, and hardware as presented.
Second.
So I have a motion by Nikki, a second by Mike to approve the bids on doors, frames, and hardware to Black Iron as presented. All those in favor by voice vote indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So we will move on to elevators.
Okay, so elevators, we got 3 bids. Otis and Schindler are the most common that we see. I got another bid from Schumacher, although Schumacher wasn't listed in the specification. We would have went to the architect asking for approval for their manufacturer if their price would have been competitive, but we didn't waste the time. Otis was actually the basis of design in the specification. So the spec was basically written off their machine. So that's a good thing that they came in low. It is the specified unit. There would have been some differences and nuances with Schindler's unit. We had to probably go back to the design team and potentially adjust the shaft dimensions and the way that unit is operated. We would have done that, certainly, if it was cost effective, because usually those two bid each other quite a bit. So Otis did prove to be the most cost effective on here. It was really a pretty straightforward scope. We did have them include one of the elevators for construction use for 6 months. So along with that is we need to tack on another 6 months of warranty so the owner still gets their full warranty. And then there's a construction use inspection. So Otis had that in their base bid, Schindler did not, so that's why we had to increase their number. And then we got some PFEs there. There's always some fall protection barricades and netting and a work platform that's usually needed in those elevator shafts, so that's what those are for. And then normally there is some type of work that needs to happen high up in the shaft during the scope of the work where only an Otis person can operate it. And yes, their hourly rate is very, very expensive. So that $10,000 you see there won't really even get us very far. So we'll be trying to get all that work done ahead of time so we don't have to do that. So I guess that's a wrap really on the, well, I guess the other thing I will say is although Otis and Schindler were specified, they are more proprietary. Since we have a 2-year warranty, they've also included a 2-year service agreement as well. So specifications only really call for one, but with CG Schmidt, as a standard, we require a 2-year warranty we provide for our clients. We'd have had this weird situation where the warranty would have been by Otis, but you could have got a service contract for somebody else. So right away, they need to give us a 2-year service agreement as well. So you're getting 2 years with this.
Do they offer longer?
I don't think I've ever seen them offer longer. Usually after the first year, they'll get in touch with the district, and the district, if you have another vendor you typically like to use or whatever,
They'll do
Right, so-
contracts with us. I mean, we have both Otis and Schindler in district. So I know they usually come with a 5-year maintenance plan after we take ownership or, their period's done.
You would do that after the warranty period.
Otis is my preferred elevator on any project I have, so, I might be biased because they're from my hometown, we've had the best experience with Otis. having long-term relationships with our clients as they've transitioned to facilities operations and just interacting with them and hearing like through 12-month warranty walks, just having a casual relationship with them and hearing from them. Otis seems to have the best life cycle that we've seen kind of on average for an elevator. And so I was really happy, to be honest, that Otis went out on this one because I'm a bit of a stickler about elevators, so.
And just to note there, they came in 29,213 on the budget. Any questions on the elevator contract? Discussion? We'll be looking for a motion.
So move to accept Otis as the elevator.
Second.
So a motion by Phil and a second by Eric to approve the elevator contract to Otis as presented. All those in favor by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right. Next, we are moving on to discussion on the operating referendum. So I'm going to turn it over to.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Thanks,
Thanks for all
Dylan.
your information. I'll turn that over to Fig and to Ron for an update on the operating referendum.
I'll go ahead and share some information, and if Ron has some stuff to put in, he can. But so the Board of Education did approve a 4-year non-recurring operational referendum at the previous meeting, and it will appear on the November 5th, 2024 election ballot. So currently what's being worked on is some documentation that we can share, some information we can share to make sure people are aware of what it is. Board of Education really worked hard and asked really good questions, hard questions. They debated, and then they decided on the non-recurring at the same amount that we've previously had, $1.5 million previously had for the previous 8 years. So this is something that's been in the budget and has been approved through this 8-year period. And the amount represents no increase, as it's the same as has been in the operational budget for the last 8 years. So we do intend to continue to be fiscally responsible as we've been, lean on the fund balance, and continue to address positions and program changes through the period to make our budget work. The fund balance provides a viable short-term solution, and it's a fund balance that we've been able to grow within the district since Mr. Olson has started. That gives us somewhat of what we call a rainy day fund, just by very, very, very good, solid fiscal management. So it gave the board the option that we do have this time that we can lean on this while we're getting things move forward with the projects in the community. So.
Yeah, so I'm working on, Jen and I are working, we'll have a handout available for the back to school open houses. So the board members who are out there will have a two-sided document to share with the community members who come in that night, all of our parents. We also are working on, I've got about 3 pages of FAQs that I've developed, and Jen will be working on editing those. So likely shortly after we start the school year and have had a chance to get through the open houses, we'll work with Jen and Heidi to bring up a page or a link on the website that'll be just for the operating referendum. Any handouts we do, we will put there. The FAQs will go there as we continue to develop more information. That's where it'll land. Probably sometime late September into early October, we'll look for a mailer to the community so that those people who maybe aren't as engaged with the district will be aware of what the question is and what some of the information behind it is. And then obviously we'll have probably some community groups that we'll be presenting to, some of the groups that typically we make the rounds with.
All right, any questions for Figueron on the operational referendum that we approved last meeting that will appear on the November 5th election ballot? All right, hearing none, we can move to Dana and the annual nurses report. Just we have our annual nurses report. I will turn it over to Dana.
So, Jen, bring up the presentation. So my name is Dana Kundert. I'm a district nurse for the school district. I'm here to present data from last school year. So you can go ahead and. So this is just it's a bunch of numbers, is really what it is. So I pulled all of the data from Skyward. So this just shows over the last 3 years of office visits by each school. You can see this past school year was a little bit less than the prior school year, just based on illnesses that have gone around. We did stop all of our COVID testing and stuff last year, so I think that's a big drop in our numbers too. But this is kind of more typical of what we've seen throughout the time I've been here. So. This slide just shows the number of scheduled medications that the health assistants or secretaries have given in through last school year. This is not like students who come in with a headache and want Tylenol. This is ones that take prescription medications at school. Again, listed by school and by year. Almost all the schools were lower than last year, and this ebbs and flows throughout the school year. We have students start meds, stop meds. So just kind of, this is pretty typical too. Some students, some like middle school gets higher some years because your students from the elementary schools who take meds move on up through the to middle school or high school. So that's why you might see like A was pretty low, but a lot of our students moved on who took those medications. So it just kind of depends, and every school year brings something different. And then this is just a slide showing those total encounters together. So the health office visits plus the scheduled medications we gave. This is the total number of students we saw in the health office at each building last year. This is just kind of showing how many students we sent home from the health office. So if they come to us, they meet our illness guidelines and they need to go home. Overall is less than the prior year, generally. I love to see because the first year I started here, we had so much illness going around. We were sending students home left or right. So I like to see the numbers a little bit lower. Why the high school is not, it was a little bit higher, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if we just had more documentation there or we did have for a while a lot of stomach stuff going around. So those students automatically get to go home. Just overall list, this is just some of the diagnoses we have in the district. So the number of students who have asthma over the past 3 years, who diagnosed asthma that have been made aware of. Students who have EpiPen orders for some allergy. The number of diabetic students we have in the district over the last 3 years, and the number of reported seizure disorders we have. So overall the numbers are increasing, which is great. I'm not sure that'll stay this year or not. We'll find out. And then vaccine compliance, this is something I report to the states within 30 days of the school year starting. The first column there, you'll see the number of students I reported on, so based on their enrollment dates and when I can report on them. The number of students who have any kind of waiver, so their family decided not to get them vaccinated first, one of the required vaccines for some reason. The number of non-compliant students, so they either had a waiver on file or they weren't vaccinated and I could just not get a hold of them, was 64 last year, which is less than the year before. And then overall, our compliance rate was at 97%, which is higher than the year before. So, which I think is great. I think vaccines are just a hot topic, and everyone has their choice. So, to be at the 97% compliant with either being vaccinated or having a waiver on file, I think is great. So. And then, Bridging Brighter Smiles is an organization that comes in, and any student is allowed, family is allowed to enroll their students. It's really more the low-income or no dental insurance students that are enrolled in the program. They come in and do cleanings. Each student gets a cleaning twice a year. They get fluoride put on. They put sealants on teeth, and if any emergent health or oral needs come up, they're able to help refer these students to get them in to be seen by a dentist in the area so they can get that looked at and taken care of. So overall, our numbers are kind of lower than the years prior. I talked to Bridging Brighter Smiles, and they said all the schools they service, the numbers were lower in general last year. I'm hoping it's because the year before they had a higher numbers because during COVID, a lot of people were going to the dentist and just didn't want any of that. So hopefully last year, with it being higher, the number of students enrolled, we got those students taken care of, and have better oral health than they have than the years prior. So hopefully that's why our enrollments were a little bit down this year, or last year. So we'll see what this year brings. And then other tasks, just myself for the health aides completed last year. We vision screen all of our K through 5 students. We partnered with the Lions Club to get that completed. Every student K through 2nd grade gets a hearing screen done. I do health talks in all for 4th and 5th grade classrooms. Do flu shot clinics for staff, but also for students. If their parents would like them to have the flu shot here at school, Green County Public Health comes in and will give those. Continuing our standard practice and with medications that we changed a year prior, and just standardizing form entry throughout the district, trying to get rid of a lot of forms and going more electronic, which just saves a lot more time and money with not printing papers. And then I do CPR training for staff over the summer as well. And then moving forward to this school year, what's it going to look like? So we'll have health assistants, staff part-time at Parkside and Northside. This past week, I held training for all secretaries in all the buildings and other staff who are going to assist with medical needs of students in the health office. Spent all day training them on anything that I feel like they need to know to assist these students. And then myself, I'll be rounding weekly at all buildings as well. I'm keeping up with my normal job duties that are district-wide. And as always, I'm available by phone to what each building is needed. And if there's a need, a secretary out or something, and I need to go there and staff for that day, that's my plan too. So that is what this year looks like. Looking for a healthy year for everybody.
And just one point of clarification, on the vaccination slide,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify on that because to some people, vaccination has become synonymous with the COVID vaccine.
Mhm.
This is not that. This
This
is
is
the
not that.
state
This is
mandated.
state
We don't,
mandated, yep.
we don't measure the COVID vaccine rate, anything like
Yeah.
that. This is just like the
The ones
measles,
that are
mumps,
mandated by the
rubella,
state of
yeah.
Wisconsin, which is not COVID, so it's all those, like generally they recommend with an office visit when you take your children, and those are what this is not COVID at all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good clarification.
Any other questions for Dana?
And is there anything that you'd want the school board to be aware of that might make your job easier?
I will say going into the new school year with less staff, it's a challenge. We'll be fine. I've been used to, I came to this job and full staff, so it's just learning something new, and I think it'll be fine. The secretaries are great. They've jumped on board. It's just me learning new ways. I have asking others for help versus me taking on everything where I had my health aides that could help before. They're not there, so it's just asking those who now have maybe more time to help with. A lot of it is the changes, and we went to all online back to school registration, so that's new. Just learning, that's new, and then also just decreasing my staff. I now have to just make sure everything's done differently than it was before, but also with less people. So, but I think it's doable.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. We can move on to the annual Pupil Services reports. We'll turn it over to Joe.
All right, I was gonna say this before Dana ran out of here, but we are really fortunate to have Dana. She works really hard. And Jim, I appreciate that question. Obviously, with the change in staffing, it's different, it's gonna look different, it's gonna feel different. I would say, while there's been some questions, the office staff has been absolutely phenomenal in stepping up. Dana's done a great job of training the staff. Realistically, we know there's gonna be some bumps in the road where we need to learn and grow, but ultimately, we feel very comfortable that we're staffed in a way that's gonna allow us to serve all of our kids. But Dana's doing a fantastic job. All right, Pupil Services report. This is a report that I provide annually. We do it for two reasons. Number one is there are some things that I'm legally required to report to the board on an annual basis. So we like to follow the law and make sure that we get those things done. The second is to just give you all a feel for some of the work that we do in Pupil Services and give you a sense of how things are going. So there's a lot in here and we could spend a lot of time. And for those of you that have been on the board, and I know Ron remembers this, There are times when I could be here talking for 45, 50 minutes plus. We try to spare you that level of detail. So I'm going to go through some of these quickly, but please feel free to interrupt and ask any questions if you do have any, because we're really excited about the work that we've been doing. This first slide is just representing something that you guys have seen. So last year, our goal related to our achievement work and some of the information we were collecting relative to proficiency in ELA and math. You guys are familiar with the 80-50 goal, 80% of all students reaching proficiency in power standards in ELA and math. And then for our aggregated target group, which is economically disadvantaged, ELL, special ed, non-white is also in there, that we would get them to at least 50%. And those are stretch goals, as we've talked about in the past. But I'm really happy to report that we've seen some really good gains. You can see here, if you look at the breakdown of some of those categories, where we're at relative to the 50% goal, and you'll see that not only are we either at or getting close to that 50% goal, but one of the things we look at is what kind of gap do we have between those subgroups and all students. And we're seeing that that gap is shrinking. And one example of that is special ed. So when we first came up with this 80-50 goal, the baseline data that we had was for ELA, our special ed students were at 17% proficiency. And in math, they're at about 26%. Now we're at about 37 and 41%. There's been a lot of hard work. It's been very intentional, directed work. And Todd's been a big part of that as well. So I have to thank Todd and certainly the principals and all the staff for their focus on these areas. But we are seeing a lot of good traction in these areas, and we're excited because while 80-50 is a stretch goal, and when we first started this, people looked at us like maybe we were asking a bit much. I think we're getting to a point now where people are saying that's attainable and we want to get it. So we're excited about the gains that we've seen in those areas. This is our joint federal notifications report, and I'm not going to go through all this, but I thought that this might be something that you all would be interested in. Basically, every year I get a report from the state that breaks down all of these areas for special education. And again, I'm not going to detail all of them. Basically, you can get a score of 0, 1, or 2. And as you see, in the vast majority, we get a perfect score. There are 4 areas where we didn't have a perfect score. 2 that we got 1s in were grad exiters, meaning did our kids in special ed graduate in high school in 4 years? If they didn't, say there's kids that graduate in 5 years or 6 years because they have an IEP and they need extra time, we get penalized for that. They like to see kids graduate in 4 years. I don't necessarily agree with that because the law says that if you have an IEP, you can stay in school until you're 21. And some parents advocate very strongly for their kids to continue in school. And we're not in a position to argue with that. But our grad exiters score is a 1, so that's something that we're paying attention to. Our dropout exiters is just as it sounds. It means, did we have a number of kids that dropped out? And for this particular year, we had 2 kids. I want you to know that we're very aware of who those kids are. We're very focused on providing individual support. Many times the interventions that we provide work. Unfortunately, sometimes they do not. I know last year we had 1 student that had an IEP that is considered a dropout, and we worked our tails off to help that student. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get him to where he needed to be. But those are areas that we're focusing on. As we go through, you'll see things like participation in our assessments, we're really good there. Our proficiency for special ed, we're 2 out of 2 because we're doing really well in those areas. One of the things that you'll see if you look at environment, K through 21, that just means, are we serving kids in the general ed environment? Are we focused on inclusion? We'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, we are. We got a 1 in ed environment, 3 through 5. That's basically our early childhood program. That's something that I'm working on with Jennifer Neuenschwander. Many of you know Jennifer. She's fantastic. But really, our model is based on an efficiency model and the amount of staffing that we have. And what the state would like us to do is to decentralize the program and do more out in the community. In order to do that, I would probably need to have more staffing. And so Jennifer and I are exploring some ways that we can do some things. The disproportionate special ed and specific categories, that's basically speaking to, are we seeing equity in our racial representation in special ed, and across special or specific categories of special ed. And that's saying that they don't see any disproportionality, that we're good there. Our preschool transitions is the big one. We got a 0 there. And that's really because the birth to 3 reports that we're getting from the county aren't coming to us on time. So we're working to make sure that our birth to 3 systems and the timing of those communications improve, because that goose egg hurts us. And then you see some of the others. At the end of the day, our team's going for a perfect score. We want a 30 out of 30. We know we can do it. There's some things that we're working on, but overall we feel really good because we're in good standing with the state, and this shows that in the vast majority of categories we're getting perfect scores. So we're happy with that.
Joe?
Yeah.
What happens if you're not? Like, what's the penalty?
Yeah, the penalty is that you go on basically the naughty list. So you're basically identified as needing to get support from the state, and they meet with you a couple times and they talk about your plans and you go through an improvement plan. So if you were to stay on that list and your scores were very low, then there would be some mandated action that they would make you take. And if it continued to be bad, they would have an improvement team come on site and work with you. Thankfully, that's not where we're at.
Hey, Joe, quick question.
Yeah.
The preschool transitions, what data are they looking at there?
Yeah, so we have portals, and basically what they want is they want to make sure that if kids are coming to us from the county birth to 3 program, that's communicated to us through transition meetings, and that we're evaluating and making a determination about those kids before they turn the age of 3. Unfortunately, what's happening is that information is coming to us late. We do those evaluations as quickly as we can, but if they're not in place by the time they're 3, we get hit with a low score. So we're very clear with our friends at the county that it's important that they get that information to us on time, and we're doing all we can to make that happen. Good question. So this is just a breakdown of the special ed categories. The red is Monroe, the black is the state. You can see the areas where we're high or low. I know that not all of you know what those abbreviations mean. Autism is straightforward. EBD is emotional behavioral disability. ID is intellectual disability, which used to be called cognitive disability or CD. OHI is other health impaired. SLD is specific learning disability. SL is speech language. Other is kind of a catch-all of low incidence disabilities such as an orthopedic impairment, visual impairment, hearing impairment, things of that nature. And then you get the total on the end, and you can see where we're at. We're a little over 16% the state of special ed in our district. The state average is just over 15%. We're working to bring that down, but we also recognize that we're the big district in a rather rural area, and we have a lot of families that move into Monroe to access our services. And so we're doing the best we can to keep that down. But overall, we feel pretty good about the work that we're doing. This I talked about. This is our ed environment for the 5-year-olds through 21. Basically, one of our goals that we've really focused on is our 80 and 80 goal, meaning we want at least 80% of our special ed students to be served in the general ed environment for at least 80% of their day. We're getting close to that. We're higher than the state average, but we know this is important, not just so kids have an inclusive experience, but also because we know that it leads to better outcomes academically, socially, emotionally for our kids. And so we're working hard to make sure we get to 80. We were there at one time, but we backslid a little bit due to some of the individual needs of our kids. But this is something that's audited on a monthly basis. And we review those kids that are not getting, every individual that's not getting into the general ed environment at least 80% of their day. Good work's been done there. All right, the BESS, we've been given the BESS for well over a decade now. The BESS is the behavioral and emotional screening system. This is really our universal screening that we use twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, with all kids in grades 4 through 12 to say, how are individuals doing? This is done by individual unless a parent or family opts them out. And we're very careful to make sure that if parents wish for their kids not to participate, that we do opt them out. But all other kids are included. And really what we want to do is know those kids that might have some needs that we may not be aware of. For the most part, kids that are identified as having some elevated risk or extremely elevated risk, we're aware of those kids for the most part, but there's always some surprises. And this allows us to make sure that we're connected with those kids, make sure they're getting what they need, and most importantly, working closely with their families to make sure they get the support they need. So sometimes I forget to mention this. So what you'll see is, if you go to the far column, spring 2024, you'll see 20%. That's the combined percentage of elevated risk and extremely elevated risk. So in the parentheses, the 18 is the elevated, the 2 is the extremely elevated, and then goes down for each school. And then the line graph above represents kind of the fluctuation over time. You can see the different buildings and where they've been at. We're in a range of 14 to 25% right now. Usually the general thought is that we're going to be around 20% of the kids are going to have some elevated risk, but that fluctuates a little bit across the buildings depending on the individual students and the needs that they have. But we're really proud of this work. We were one of the early adopters of this, and now most schools in the state of Wisconsin are doing this kind of universal screening work for social emotional health. Panorama survey, you already saw this graph last year. I just put this in to remind you that we're going to continue to do panorama. The one difference next year is that last year it was anonymous. It wasn't connected to individual students. This year we're loading in all the student information so that we not only can aggregate it and look how we're doing as a school and a district, but also use that individual student data, load it into
Otis.
That's big Otis guy, not your Otis, different Otis. But that's gonna allow us to aggregate all of that student level data and get a sense of how kids are doing. So we know their achievement, their attendance, we know how they're feeling about school climate and their value of school. And together we can use that information to make some important decisions about kids. It also helps us when we run those queries in Otis and helps us identify some kids that might be at risk. So that'll happen in December. We will be giving another panorama survey. The next several slides are basically our ODRs, or office discipline referrals. This gives you a sense of how many issues we're having in our schools. This is average referrals per day. So this is your typical, somebody did something wrong and they get sent to the office, right? Or they get written up. This is what we're talking about. What you'll see across all of these is the green line represents the 25th percentile. The black line in the middle is the median score. The 75th percentile represents, or the red is the 75th percentile. This is a nationally normed system that we use, our Swiss system. And you'll see the lines change a little bit. And the reason it changes is it's depending on the demographics within the building, the level of the building, and the number of kids that you have within that particular school. So really what you want to know is we try to stay at or below the median line. That's usually our goal. If we're at or below the green, that means things are going really well behaviorally in that school. And Abe Lincoln has been doing really well. And I think that's a testament to having a smaller school where everyone knows the names of the kids and some really good relationships. So they've been doing well for a while now. If you look at Northside, you'll see Northside has a lot going on. Two things to note with Northside. They do report both major and minor ODRs, so that's why theirs are a little bit higher. But the other thing is, Northside by far has some of the most significant mental health issues in our school district right now. Some of the issues that they're dealing with are heartbreaking, quite frankly, and require a lot of intensive support. And I'm really proud of that staff. And so when you see this, I'd encourage you not to think of it as, oh my gosh, what's going on in that school. I would say, if you were to look at the individual student data, you'd see it's a small percentage of kids that are driving those numbers. And the work they're doing to bring it down over the course of the school year speaks to the level of intervention and relationships that are being developed in that building. So really good work there. So some really tough needs, but you know, our staff across the board, not just at Northside, but particularly in this case, are working hard to make sure kids feel safe at school. Parkside, again, also had some things going on there. You know, it was a small number of kids that were really driving those numbers. but they worked really hard to bring those in line as we close out the year, and so I feel good about where we're at there. Middle school numbers are really good. We're down around that 25th percentile, and high school is also excellent. So I think if you ask anybody that walks through our schools, particularly those that visit from other districts, they're often shocked by how well behaved our kids are when they walk through, especially at the high school. They can't believe it half the time, and it speaks to the culture in our community that we have here. So discipline rate, this is another one that I'm really proud of. This is speaking to the number of discipline occurrences divided by enrollment. That gives you our incident rate. So if you look on the far right-hand side for the 23-24 school year, you'll see our discipline rate. You'll also see averages for the different levels. And what you'll see is the breakdown for the 3 elementaries. All are well below the elementary state average. If you look at the middle school, this is where I need to sing the praises of Matt and Lindsay when they came in as new leadership at the middle school. One of the things that I talked to them about and they identified on their own is we need to change how we approach discipline at the middle school. We've had some years where it's just been far too high, and they effectively cut that discipline rate in half. And that's not by accident. That's by a lot of intentional work, developing relationships with at-risk kids, developing relationships with families of those kids, and they've done an excellent job, and I couldn't be more happy about it because the vast majority of our discipline issues happen at the middle school level, and that's not just us, that's developmentally how it works. But they've done great work there. And then again, our high school doing some good work there at about 3%, where the high school state average is 12%. The reason the averages aren't populated for this year for the state is I just don't have that data yet. They haven't shared it with me, so I'm always running a year behind on that. Bullying, we've talked about this in the past. I'm not going to read the definition to you, but we have a formal definition that we've used for years. Our kids are aware of this, and we do a lot of intentional work and a lot of universal instruction around what bullying is and that it won't be tolerated in our schools. Here's our data over the course of several years now, and you'll see that we've had a steep decline over the last 13 years. We had 35 incidents this year, so it was up from 26. A little bit of a bounce back. Some of that, we had that low valley there, and that was the COVID years. And so when kids aren't in school as much, we're not going to have as many incidents. But we feel like 35 incidents across our district in one school year is a pretty good number. We have an operational definition of what a bully is, and that's basically if you have 3 or more incidents of bullying or harassment, we define you as a bully in our schools. And we only had 1 student that met that definition. So what that tells you is if there are kids that engage in this type of behavior, we are immediate in our response to working with those kids. We don't just support the victim, we support the kids that are engaged in that work so they understand clearly what they're doing is not acceptable. And then we try to understand what's going on with that kid as well. And we've been really successful at, and that speaks to the work of our principals, our Pupil Services team, our teachers. Everyone's invested in that effort, and it's been very effective. Seclusion and restraint, this is another celebration. We continue to bring that down. Seclusion and restraint are responses to kids when they're out of control and they're jeopardizing the safety of themselves or others. And we've worked really hard to reduce the number of those incidents because, quite frankly, no one likes to be involved in those situations, and we know that it creates some trauma for our kids. And what you see here is basically saying we saw a significant reduction last year from the year prior. And if you look at this over time, the line graph on the left is tracking the number of incidents of seclusion and restraint since 2018-19, and you see that steady drop, and it correlates with the number of students that have been involved. So when I looked at other districts around the state, I think we're doing a great job. We would love it if we'd get to the point where we had 0 to report. We're not there, and frankly, there are some situations that require us to go hands-on with kids to keep them safe. But we're going to continue to train a lot of people in our nonviolent crisis intervention work because that's been significant, helping us get those reductions that you see there. School-based mental health, this continues to be a priority for us. It's something that, to be honest, is a bit of a struggle. Some good news, bad news here. Good news is that we brought on Care Solace as our mental health navigator. That's been incredibly effective, and it's helped us identify a number of mental health providers that we did not have a connection with. So that's been excellent. Bad news is I was notified this summer that the Monroe Clinic is no longer going to be able to serve as a provider for our school-based mental health support. They lost some staff. They're kind of bringing their staff back in-house to meet the needs of their kids in the clinic and their adults in the clinic as well. So we're actively looking to see if there's another provider that we can work with, but we continue to work with Avenues and Orion to provide some of our school-based mental health work. Teletherapy is becoming more of the norm, and that's good for some kids, but it doesn't work for other kids. And so we're trying to explore all of our options. But it's important for us that we have some options available for our kids and our families when they identify that they need it. And just as a reminder, Care Solace is not only for our kids, it's also available for our staff and for community members, family members that are connected to kids. So there's been a lot of support that's been provided across the community by Care Solace. And then finally, I talked about our 80 and 80 goal. We're going to continue to do that. The instructional priorities are something we did our first training today. We feel really good about it. You're going to hear more about instructional priorities from Todd and myself at a curriculum meeting in the near future. But basically, that's talking about relational teaching, engagement, and assessment practices. And then we wrap in some co-teaching work. We're incredibly excited about the work that we're doing. We've seen some great gains, and we're confident that through this work, we're going to see more. And that's it. That was a fast-paced review of that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But the takeaway is an incredible amount of work is being done, and we are thrilled with some of the results that we're getting because the staff's working really hard, and the kids are showing great gains. Questions? Too hot for questions, isn't it?
Joe?
Just a comment, Joe, I see on the bullying and harassment data that 28 of the 35 incidents were middle school.
Yep.
Is that kind of like the age of the kids that drives that?
Yeah, if you look at the data across the nation, developmentally at the middle school is a mess nationwide, right? Middle school is a really tough time. And so they do a lot of work. They're very intentional and very focused there. But the reality is middle schoolers are still trying to figure a lot of things out. And unfortunately, sometimes they're making some bad choices. And so many times it's happening outside of school and it bleeds into school. And so we're just seeing that that's the time when that really flares up. But the response from the middle school is absolutely excellent. They're doing a great job with it. So you're right. Thanks for pointing that out, Phil. But that's not just a Monroe issue. That's nationwide where you see the vast majority of bullying incidents taking place.
So at the middle school, that significant drop, I just want to make sure that we know you've gone and looked root cause. It's not that we've kind of dropped the accountability that we're holding those troubled students to. It's an actual drop in the need for the discipline.
For the discipline rate, that's what you're talking about, Mike? Yeah. So, so we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but to be quite honest, I felt that there were times that we were too quick to provide suspensions for kids relative to some of the mistakes that they were making. And so I think it's a combination of the work that Matt and Lindsay and the staff have done to be very clear with kids and be connected with kids, but also when they're responding to them, it's not, hey, Mike, you're out of here for 3 days. It's, hey, let's reflect together. Let's talk about what's going on. Help me understand how we got to this point. Okay, this is how we're going to handle it next time. If you're frustrated, come and see me or come and see any one of these people. And through that connected work, kids have responded very positively. They've done a lot of work to be connected to kids who we've identified ahead of time that we know are at risk, to make sure that when something does happen, we have a relationship already and we can respond and say, hey, what's going on? And work through that versus you out for 3 days, because we know that leads to negative consequences and frankly, more suspensions down the road. So, yeah, we feel really good about the work that's happening.
Great.
Good question.
Other questions for Joe? Thank you for putting all this together.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So next we have our first reading of our food services policy manual. So I will turn that over to Ron. He and food service and Ron have reviewed this.
Yep, there's basically 5 policies that are there that affect food service. 3 of them, 8550, 8540, and 8531, really don't have much for changes other than some either grammatical items or things that were moved from those policies into one of the other policies. So we'll talk a little bit about 8500 and 8510. The reason for these changes coming and for being out of order with the others is, if you know lawyers, when they write our policies, basically they look at the federal or state standards and say, this is what you have to do to meet them. Anything over that you demonstrate that you choose or want to do is okay, but this is the bare minimum. DPI, as they were auditing school districts, ourselves included, but a number of school districts across the state, in order to make it easier for them to confirm for the federal government that schools across the state are doing what they would like, the feds would like to see, they wanted more language in, basically describing what districts are doing. And so in their audit write-ups of a number of districts, ourselves included, they asked for revisions to the policy. So Neola went back, sat down with DPI, came up with acceptable choices with DPI, and then that we came back and are putting them in. So I'll start with 8500. We may have a couple last minute revisions before we finalize this next month. But if you scroll down, not a lot on the first 2 pages. And then you get to page 3, where we have an accommodation grievance. That will be one of the 2 areas where I believe we're gonna have a change. Basically, if a substitute meal is denied, meaning a child has a medical necessity that requires a substitute meal, if they don't feel that they're getting the service that they need, that first appeal will actually come to me as the business administrator. So in A, where that first selection is, it should say business administrator. At the bottom of that paragraph, you can see if they then appeal it, it would go to the district administrator. Scrolling down, I need to verify with Eric also the modification based on non-compliant medical requests. We're not required to have this, and so we may choose not to have it in there, but we do what's basically in that first paragraph. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. We don't require people to, actually I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's fine as that is. When we get down to the next page where you see fluid milk substitution, that's where we don't require people to bring in a medical statement for a fluid milk substitution. If the family attests to it, we try and make that accommodation to, soy milk, almond milk, the acceptable federal choices that are out there, or we help them pick a lunch that meets the 3 of 5 components. And so we're doing what's in one, and so I think we're going to probably keep that checked. The second sentence, we won't have where they have to have a written and signed request. We pretty much try and accommodate those as we can. With religious reasons, they wanted one of 2 choices be selected. We basically, we don't have a legal obligation to meet them. However, we will try and we will work with students to choose a meal that works with whatever their requirements are, much like we do if a student or parent has a choice. If it's not a medical necessity, if it's medical required, we meet it. If it's a personal choice, we try and accommodate if we can, but otherwise we help them choose the lunch options that best fit whatever their lunch choices are, or lunch preferences, I should say.
Ron, I just have a question. What is offer versus serve?
So offer versus serve is basically, recall when we went through school, I think we were in a serve world, not an offer versus serve. You basically go through the line, and in an offer world, every food component has to be put on your tray. In an offer versus serve world, you may choose, do I want the meat or do I not want the meat? Do I want the vegetable? Do I not want the vegetable? Do I want the starch? And so you have to take 3 of the 5 components of the meal, milk being one of them, and for it to be a countable meal. So you can't just say, I just want chicken nuggets and nothing else. That doesn't work. But it's not, you're just going through the line and, yep, you're getting a ladle of everything, whether you like it or not. Those days have changed a little bit. The other part is you get further down, you see a couple, 3 paragraphs there on the page from the bottom that were eliminated. That's because they've been moved into other parts of the other policy. Actually, some of it was even moved up to earlier in this policy. So that's really what was driven in 8500. 8510, Joe's thing there. 8510 is actually the wellness component. And so basically, don't think of it as just like our complete district wellness. This is within the food service division, you also have to have a wellness component of it. And so basically, they just wanted some of the items of it spelled out as to how you create it. And so there was 3 options. We will have our wellness committee that's going to provide an ongoing review and evaluation of our wellness policy. They're going to meet no less than 2 times during the school year to implement, assess, and review, and make recommendations for changes. We've identified what the representation is. It's administrators, it could be, it may include administrators, board members, classroom teachers, physical ed teachers, school food service representatives, school nurse, community members, parents, nutrition or health teachers, and school counselors. And then a lot of that other language was no longer required with the way that the policies are now set up. Moving down, when you get to your school meal program, basically all you had to pick was A, and just say, all meals must meet or exceed the current nutrition standards. Because we do a number of these items, we chose to leave them in our policy. We do make drinking water available during meal times. We do have all of our schools that participate in the National School Lunch Program, the School Breakfast Program, and the Summer Food Program. All of our meals are accessible to all students in our buildings. We do not withhold food as punishment, and we try and make sure that all meals are appealing and attractive and served in a clean and pleasant setting. Many of the other items that maybe aren't on there are in some buildings and maybe not, and we may try and achieve. Oftentimes, for the most part, we do run our recesses ahead of lunch so that when students eat their lunch, they take their time to eat and they're not rushing through their food to run out to recess. But I can't guarantee that it's always going to happen on every single day. So, because we change our schedules with early releases and things of that nature. So they're not selected, but that doesn't mean we're not doing them. It's just kind of a gotcha that you make sure that the day that they come audit you, that there's no chance that they're not seeing something that you had selected in your policy. And so then the last one is school meal program participation is we just that we will notify them and shall be encouraged to determine eligibility for reduced or free. So obviously we really encourage people to take advantage of free reduced. A, it helps us with some of the federal programs. B, we even support it locally by having fee waivers for parents. I think it's a good program for our parents and if anything, the families in need, we wish, we would just fill out the paperwork because it then takes some stuff off their plate and helps the district as well. Smart snacks, you can go really down the well with smart snacks as to how well you want to define them. Basically, we say that we encourage all food served to try and meet the minimum standards. We're not monitoring it. We're not, We're not the snack police that tells the parent or child that they can't hand that snack out. We try and follow when we can. Food's offered, basically, that's what I was getting to. And then in fundraising, each organization can potentially have up to 2 fundraisers per year that don't meet the school snack requirement. So if, FFA fruit probably would meet it. However, if somebody's doing a candy sale, or if somebody's doing a pizza sale, or, what are the cinnamon knots or whatever, those things clearly don't meet the school lunch and snack provisions. We do still allow those fundraisers to happen. We just limit how often they can happen. And so that's really what it is. Many of those things weren't changes. It was really just bringing them into the policy. There's a few other choices down there with about the wellness committee and the student and the community engagement with it, where we made our choices. But we made choices that basically reflect what we've been doing, but now we've just got them in the policy. So if you have any questions, circle back to Eric or myself. This was the initial read. We'll be bringing it back again next month. And if there's any revisions, I'll make sure I'll have it covered to let you know what they are.
Any questions or comments on the first reading of the Food Services Policy Manual? Thank you for doing that one.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, it's coming out of, we had just done all those policies, but we did need this, so it was good timing for us that Neil had gotten it done.
Moving on to the sponsorship guide and presentation. So I know Ron, Jen, Fig have worked on, and I think many people have worked on the sponsorship guide, and so we'll have that turn over to Fig.
Okay. So what you have attached is the sponsorship guide that was updated. Jen made a couple updates today just to get a couple other things in before the meeting. But it's been assembled as a handout. And then we have a presentation attached too, but we're going to talk mostly about the handout. And what it is really, it's regarding opportunity to sponsor different areas and aspects of the new high school project. So there's a group of administrators, staff, community members that have met on 3 different occasions through the spring and summer, and we've discussed different ways to best communicate with our community about the project enhancements. So the materials that are being shared would be part of any type of, community outreach or information for groups or businesses or other interested groups that want to look into sponsorships. So the money related to the sponsorships, they'd be used for future maintenance and updates, may be used to enhance specific areas through better finishes or upgraded or higher level equipment. So some of the things there's a short term for some of those things because we're going through the bid packages, and some of those things have to be earmarked or budgeted, and they're going to be purchased. But some of the things we have currently in bid pack 4, we have at least 17 alternatives. Is that correct? Something like that, yeah. So we have some alternatives in those packages too. So this is near final draft for both. I know Ron spent a great deal of time collecting and organizing information from many districts that have done different sponsorships in areas and defined that are in the materials. And then Jen actually has done many drafts, assembling the information and getting into presentation format. So we'd use this and we'd offer individual or group presentations. So this is the first view for the board as we get ready to start this information campaign. So if we want to just look at the sponsorship guide. So this is what Jen has assembled from the information that we had. We talk about the purpose. We show some of the renderings and things that we've gotten from PRA with the new campus. We proceed going through the contents and contacts to get started. And the first unit that we look at is academic sponsorship opportunities as one of the categories. So as you go through this, each thing is broken down. For example, the first thing listed in the academic was a technical education, STEM wing. And the fee for sponsorship is $1 million for a lifetime or $250,000 for 10 years. And then it goes through anywhere from 5 to 6 bullet points in each area, talking about what the sponsorship entails and what they're going to get for each thing. And so you can go through each area in academics. Second area is the athletic sponsorship opportunities, same setup. As you go through, there's opportunities to sponsor lifetime or sponsor for a defined number of years, again, with what you would get for that sponsorship. Let's see here. And then the art sponsorship opportunities is also part of this, and same format. So as you go through it, it lists these specific areas in arts and shows renderings. Then, of course, we just include some information, the sponsorship form, an overview shot of what the campus would look like, and a thank you, of course, and then at the end, ways they can access information off of our website. So this is gonna be basically our guiding presentation document to share. Now, this list is not all inclusive. For example, if somebody came and said, we would like to sponsor, I'm just gonna throw this out there, sponsor a black box theater. Well, we'd have to find out what the cost of that would be. We'd have to look at it. Now, there are areas in the construction that we plan for future additions. That would be an area where we'd have space we have planned for a future addition. We have additional possibilities for additional, obviously academic, current technical education. So there's all different things that are designed in the building so that it can be added on to in the future if needed. So, but that would just be an example. So if that's not listed, but somebody says they wanted to do that, that's certainly something we could talk about.
So basically, as we looked at a number of districts, there were some who were just doing one-offs, obviously, fundraising. There were a handful that were doing more systemic approaches, such as this. Differing variations, there's probably about at least a half dozen districts who are using a formatting very similar to this as far as proposal and application form. And, you know, as you go through it, one of the things that basically when you look at like the STEM wing, someone may want to sponsor the whole STEM wing. It may be more likely that we'll have 5 or 6 individuals or businesses that would rather do individual parts of it because it more aligns with what their specific business is. In talking to other districts, oftentimes what they found out in situations like that, if they were fortunate enough to find that one large sponsor, and you then tell them, hey, we have somebody else who would also like to sponsor something else within that, are you okay with that? You have the right to the name of the entire wing, but would you mind if somebody else also wanted to sponsor, you know, the auto lab within the wing? Most people generally say, have at it, you know, more donations for the school, the better. And so it gives us that opportunity. It would be great if we had a single sponsor, and if they said they wanted to just have it singular to themselves, that'd be wonderful, because it would be a great sponsorship and a lot of funds coming to the district. Again, there's the opportunity where, you know, there may be more likely that it will be the individual classrooms, or it possibly could even be both. System kind of carries throughout, you know, again, as Big said, there's academics, there's athletics, as well as performing arts. One thing, when other districts were looking at funding, most of them were using an approach where by having the systemic system in place, they then were able to maintain whatever items they were getting, right? So in some cases, they were just fundraising in order to have it. And then they didn't have a great plan for how they were going to maintain it. Most of the districts who are using the sponsorship model are districts that were kind of like in our boat, where we have a new building or a new facility that's being constructed. Yep, we might be able to take a portion of the dollars to help enhance some items, but really a lot of that sponsorship over the next 10 years is going to make sure that when we need a new turf field, the district can afford to put a new turf field in. When we need to get, you know, repairs done to parts of, you know, the sound system in the PAC, we have funds set aside to do that. You know, districts can make the decision to, if they want to use the dollars completely upfront, or if they want to use them on a kind of a, budget backfiller. But I would say most of the districts are using it as a way to sustain those buildings and programs. And I think sponsors appreciate that, right? They're not only helping the district, but they're also making sure that what they are sponsoring looks good and is well maintained for years to come. You'll note most of them have 10-year sponsorships. We also give the opportunity if somebody wants to have the naming or the sponsorship rights for a lifetime, they can do that. So if Joe Monroe wants it to be the Joe Monroe Stadium for the rest of his life, we just need a really big check, Joe.
I'll let you know.
So the presentation that's attached there too is really just an explanation of this stuff too that we would use in presentation format. So if we were meeting with people or with any groups or businesses.
Yeah, it's kind of a guiding for the conversation. Obviously, we'll have the sponsorship guide, which will provide a lot of the information and that people can continue to go back to if they have questions after you've left. But the presentation kind of hits on some of the highlights out of the guide and then has some interactions in it, so you can see the fly through of the building and some of those neat wow things so that people can see them will be embedded into the presentation. And it's not something necessarily that you need to go in and have a huge screen. If it's available, great. But if you just want to go in and sit down with somebody with your laptop and you walk them through it, you can do that, like Jim and I sitting next to each other.
Any questions on the sponsorship guide and the work they're doing? This is a lot of work, so thank you all for putting this together and the whole committee who worked on this.
I'm curious, did you all get a sense, what's the range that you saw districts raise from a campaign like this?
There were some districts certainly that had, you gotta look also where they're coming from, right? Which part of the state and how big their business communities are. There certainly were districts that had much bigger numbers attached to some of their items. We kind of fell in there there was a handful of districts. This would make us competitive with some of our larger districts, but, the Fort Atkinsons and Horicons and et cetera of the world who were a little more closer to our size. I think, what is along Johnson Creek, were also using this model. We're more kind of consistent with those size districts. Now, certainly, like a New Berlin and some of those, there were some districts that had, bigger community business partners where they had much bigger numbers put onto their things. And what you found with most districts was they're okay if some districts are marketing it hard up front. Some districts are just letting their community know it's available. And if they fill them, great. If they don't fill them, that's okay. And in some cases, they're finding more people coming forward than they expected. And I think that's where, if you look at some of the 10-year commitments, I met with a couple of community business leaders and said, do these numbers make some sense, right? So if you're looking at a 10-year marketing advertising plan, are these numbers for supporting the school district that you feel in our community business people would support? And they did. Obviously, there's some bigger players who might support some of the bigger items that are on the list, but then there's a whole other tier underneath that. We also did look at another, some districts just do here's a board, everyone, just donate and your name goes on a board. It's a different approach to it, but this way we really thought it was systemic. Doesn't mean we also couldn't do the other if we decide that, hey, there's some other things that we want to do. I think even the boosters themselves may be looking to do some of that with some recognition plaques or whatever, and that would be fine. But I think this really establishes the rules and expectations for, if a business wants to be Business X, sponsor of, the Monroe High School Performing Arts Center. This is what it is. And typically, we also looked like at the MAC, and that was one of the things they asked for, and I know it's in there, is so that the first time you lead, you always lead with that, right? So when you put out a flyer or you put something on your website, it says it's this location, right? It's the Business X Performing Arts Center. Throughout the rest of your communication, you can say the Monroe High School PAC, right? It's not like you have to use that every time, but you just need to make sure you lead with that. Much like if you have your announcer at a basketball or football game, you lead with the name of who's the sponsor is for the gym or who the sponsor is for the stadium. If you're encouraging people to go to the concessions, you lead with the sponsor, of the concessions. And there's other things that we offer, if people want to buy the supplies for the concession areas, we'll then let them have, their company name if they're the sponsor of the concessions on those supply goods, but they have to then provide them. So there's, I won't say a ton of details, but there's little nuances throughout it as you look at it that hopefully makes some sense.
I like how it's split, that you can do lifetime or 10-year, but first right of refusal, that's a good idea.
Yeah, if you've committed for 10 years and you want to redo it for another 10, you're going to have that first right. Obviously, it'd be great if somebody wanted to step up with some of the lifetimes, but I mean, that's a big commitment. But, it's that school's going to be there a long time too, so.
Other discussion or questions on the sponsorship guide? Hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the furniture service vendor.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this over to Ryan, just with a brief introduction here. So Ryan did write the RFP for us through Up and Keel, and Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, so we went through a process and we sent out a request for proposals and sent out to 9 potential furniture vendors. Some were ones that we had worked with, some were selected by the district because of a history that they had with them, and we compiled a list. 7 of those responded. And then out of those 7, we went through just reviewing the responses, internal discussion, decided to interview 4 of them. And then through the interview process, came down to 2. And then through more internal discussion, came up with 1 recommendation. And so that recommendation is for Demco. They are a supplier and they are a manufacturer, so they do both. So they have their own line and they have access to many, many other lines. They're an installer. It's a one-stop shop. With all the groups that made it to the interview phase, they're a one-stop shop. They do the design, they do the project management, procurement, the installation, and then they handle warranty issues. So all the groups checked all of those boxes. But at the end of the day, we felt like, though all very qualified, all do great work. For this instance, for this case, we came to the recommendation of Demco. This is a little bit different, I will acknowledge, than anything else that's been brought before you from C.G. Schmidt. That was a bid-based, a number attached to it. We can all look at the low number and make a decision based off of that. This actually hasn't been designed yet. This is more likened to hiring a design firm, a design build firm. So we have a budget. They are aware of that budget. They have to meet that budget. And within that budget, they have to design it, project manage it, procure it, install it. And they're fully aware of that. And that is traditionally how the commercial furniture industry works, especially within schools. So there's not a number attached to this. There is a budgetary number, and we can talk about that if you would like. But as in like a provided from the company, we're going to do it for X, and this is what we're going to do. There's just not a design for the furniture yet. PRA will have a hand in this too, the architect on the project. They will have a supervisory role with them, helping make sure that the selections of the furniture meet the overall interior design scheme. There'll be a multi-layered attack at this, I put it this way. There'll be user group meetings for each given space, where the furniture vendor will talk to the end users, selected by the district and the high school of who should be in those meetings, and talk about what their needs are, what their wants are, what the function of the space is, what the number counts on rooms are, all of the things that you would think about when you think about furniture. They'll have all those conversations, and then a PRA will play a role that makes sure that the information taken from those meetings aren't in conflict of what's already known about the project, that they all meet the interior design scheme, but also one of the biggest elements is making sure it's coordinated with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, making sure that we're not putting a desk where a whiteboard should be, not putting a teacher's desk where there's no data, those type of things. So there's a lot of that coordination that has to happen. So it's gonna be a bit of a marriage between our existing architecture and this firm coming in, working together. But the onus of creating furniture floor plans, working with the district and coming up with the best possible set of products, and then the delivery of those products will be on the furniture vendor. And so, again, through the kind of rigorous process we went through, narrowing it down, we felt like Demco at this point is the best option for this project, and we're happy to recommend them.
Does this include like chemistry lab, the tables, sinks?
So the
Is all
tables,
part of that?
the tables are casework, so they're built in. So furniture, there's an idea that if you pick up the building and turn it upside down and shake it, and all the stuff that falls out, that falls in the FF&E world, and that's one of those F's is furniture. And so anything that's loose, like these desks would be furniture, but if that desk was attached to that wall, then that would be casework, because that's built in that way. So they would be doing like the chairs, any of the typical classrooms pack is what they usually call it. So the teacher area, all the seating, they would be doing the cafeteria / cafe setup out there. They would be meeting all of the needs basically of anything that's not built in, like a cabinet or a permanent desk. If it were to be built in, they would be meeting those needs.
What's the budget for the furniture portion?
Currently, it's 1.25 million.
So I guess I'm a little bit disappointed in the level of detail of this process. Like for 1.25 million, I think we need to see who were the people that participated in this process. What did you like about Demco versus the others? It doesn't seem transparent enough to me for the board to make a decision.
Sure, and I would leave that to Fig and Ron and because they're part of the process of how they would want to present that information. But we do have, they all sent slide decks, as you would guess. We all have those saved. We can share all of that information. I will warn you that a presentation slide deck from a furniture company looks exactly like a presentation slide deck from the next furniture company. I know some are probably listening to this and don't appreciate that, but that's just how it is with vendors. They all kind of put together the same information, and it all seems to be, good enough, I guess. But what really comes down to is the relevant work, right? Like what other districts have they worked in? Work experience personally. We do a lot of work with furniture vendors, so who they've worked with, experiences that maybe we've had, maybe experiences that C.G. Schmidt has had, especially PRA, Brianna with PRA, their interior designer. She has lots and lots of experience with working with furniture vendors. So the process was essentially was working through their presentations, and then the interview process. Beyond, I don't know if this is the right venue for getting into more particulars in that case, but we can share all of that information. I was personally, my team was on those meetings, I was not. So if Mike or Carl, no, it was just Mike actually, wasn't it? Mike Huffman on our team was as part of those meetings. But also the district and PRA were in those meetings too, as part of the interview. But I'd be happy to answer any more direct questions that you have, specifics.
Sure, just to Mike's point, is there a reason we can't wait until you've gone through the process of vetting out vendors and getting bids? Or do you want them involved earlier for design? Or
They wouldn't be involved this is how they get involved. So there's no way to move forward with them without selecting them. So because of the nature of what they do, we would have to ask someone to design the furniture and then send them a design to price it. And we don't want that, and that's not necessarily the typical way of working with a commercial furniture vendor, is that they design the product they deliver.
I'm just trying to understand,
Sure.
you know.
It's like a design-build contract.
It is definitely a design-build contract. It's all in-house. So they provide, it's a turnkey service, put it that way. They book into the service, they provide everything within that service with the input and oversight of our architect.
There's more control on trying to hit a target budget too that way, right?
Yes, yep, it helps with, so in this case, cost control is number one. We want to make sure we hit our budget. We want to get the very best product for that budget. And I think what having it all inclusive and having that focused of an effort from one provider will give us the ability to manage that budget clearly. I can give an example. I had not a school job, another job that was a corporate job, high-end office furniture. The architect designed all the furniture, and then we sent it over, because it's a much smaller job. The architect designed the furniture, and we sent it to the furniture provider, and it absolutely blew our budget because the architect just put in what they thought was great, and they did put in what they thought was great, but they didn't put in what was on the budget because the architect doesn't know how much the furniture costs. And so ultimately we hired that furniture vendor to become what we need them here to be and reverse engineer everything so that we could actually hit the target.
I don't have a problem with the process, but do you have anything in writing, or will you, with this vendor that, you know, here's a not to exceed number? Or is this just kind of a verbal, here's our budget, don't exceed it?
Oh, we'll contract with them.
So you will contract them?
We'll have a contract.
This is different than the other bids that
No,
we're
I get
looking
that.
at, yeah,
Yeah.
like very different. And that's
Yeah.
what he's.
And it will be an owner direct, meaning
I just didn't
district
want it to
direct
be an
contracts.
open-ended, you know, here's what we would like you to do. It's gotta be, here's what you have to do.
Yeah, some of the early steps, once we select them, will be working out the service contract with them and working out those terms and conditions and the business details of the business terms of that contract. And in that, we will state the budget.
Can you speak a little bit to who was in those meetings? I'm assuming it was all of our contractors, our owner's rep, district people, so, and was it universally agreed that this would be the select vendor?
Peggy, if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, so that everybody was there. PRA had their designer in there too, and that's where they derived the number from, as she came up with that number that we have in our budget. So we were all in those interviews, correct? Yep. So all of the vendors offered similar but different things in their things. So for example, Demco, I think, offered a couple pilot classrooms where they would provide different furniture to the district that we could set up and pilot and try out, or some different areas we could do that. Most of the vendors offered that in some varying degree. They also offered some people that have written about learning spaces and how to properly maximize and create engaging learning spaces. And they have a couple people that they actually they'll send, and they'll actually work with our staff when we're doing some of those things to determine, you know, what the best fit and finish is gonna be. So, yeah, so, I mean, this process is just, it's very different than what we look at, where you come and you put a thing out, and we have a budget number, and then they say, well, this is our bid for the budget, it's either above or below or at. This is something where, like Ryan said, we have a budget number, they're coming in, they're gonna do the design, then they're gonna make sure that they fill the building with the furniture that we need to use in the building, and it's all, I can't remember what the class is it Class A, is that what it's called, Class A?
Furniture.
The furniture, yeah.
Yes.
It's like Class A furniture, so the quality of the furniture and the fit and finish is all of a high quality.
You both worked with Demco in the past.
I haven't, but I rarely hold contracts with furniture vendors. It's almost always through the owner.
Yeah, Huffman Keel is actually, we have a relationship with Demco, but we have not worked with Demco directly. We did do a lot of, well, Mike, I should say I'll just call him out. Mike made some phone calls to districts that we have relationships with that have used Demco and had really great experiences with them. And so the references were glowing.
Can you speak a little bit to why is this process different? Because we could have just said, here's our number and then bid it out, including the design, right? So
We didn't have a design, so that's the issue is that,
yeah, but couldn't you, I'm just trying to understand, we could have organizations or companies bid on the process, including the design component, right?
that's in essence what they're doing with the stated budget. So essentially, let me back up. You wouldn't get a company to complete a design on at risk with the possibility that they wouldn't win the job. So without a design, which we don't have one, we couldn't have asked them to, hey, design it in-house, figure out how much it's gonna cost and come back and we'll let you know if we choose you or not. Because they would spend tens of thousands of dollars on the design internally at risk without the guarantee of winning the job. So now that if they get selected, they've won the job, then they can allocate those resources to that design without there being a risk point of losing the job.
I
So
think
this
what
be
Jim
some-
is saying is, why can't you bid it to competitive bidding for design and supply of the material? I mean, I understand what we're saying here, but
And I don't have a huge problem with it, I'm just trying to understand, that's my question. Couldn't we have just included in what we were bidding out, the design and
Right.
the thing that you're asking us to approve, we could have, why couldn't we have put that to a competitive bid like we did with the other bid packages? I think that's what I'm trying to understand.
to include design and
For furniture, this is pretty normal, right? Because there's so many different options. And the reason they don't put a price to it at this early stage is because it could be like these chairs, right? So whoever's selected is gonna sit down with the architect, the design team, whatever, and, okay, which chairs do you want? Here's price ranges. What's the configuration of the desks and tables? It'd be very, very difficult for them with no configuration, number of seats, anything provided to them, because the architect didn't design it. We didn't pay them to design that.
So
I understand that part. What really I'm struggling with here is every other portion of this work, and this is a pretty big portion. We've gotten, okay, here are the vendors, here's who we qualified, here's the reason we want to select this one, whereas here we interviewed, we had 7, we interviewed 4, all are great, but we want Demco.
You want a list of all the vendors that they
I just
looked
want more transparency. Okay, here's the 4, here's the pluses, here's why we're recommending, because it's a big chunk of money, and I mean, in what I see here, it's all the companies have excellent references and are capable of the work. That's right in here, and then we recommend Demco.
And I'll echo, that's accurate, that they all are, that is a challenge, right? To qualify what you can't quantify, right? Because they all have the ability to do great work. And I would say at the end of the day, when hearing reports back from the interviews that, like interviewing a contractor or an architect, that when what you're doing is somewhat commoditized, meaning there's not a whole lot of margin swinging either way in the numbers of it, that at the end of the day, it's who performed well on the day, right? Who showed up to the interview and won the interview? Who showed up to there and you were like, I want to work with them? And they seem either, they're forward-thinking, problem-solving, whatever flowery language you want to put on them, is that the report I personally got back, and I'll let Ron and Fig speak more clearly because they were there, and I hate doing this kind of, this is what I heard type statements, was that they won the day, that the presentation they gave was quality. And now, the challenge is that their direct competitor didn't fall on their face, right? And so at the end of the day, it was those folks in the room said Demco won the day, and it seemed as they could fit. And now, I will say that again, their competitors would do a great job because I've worked with their competitors too. But I would say that I'm trusting the report out from the group that was actually there and saying that the recommendation is Demco.
That's what I'm missing. Like, you got that report, so you understand where we're just being asked on faith to say, go with this, right? Whereas everything else, not saying that you're not right, but everything else in this process, especially with that much money, we've been given the detail to go along with that.
Yeah, and I think we can provide the names if that's is helpful, that's not a problem at all. The thing we can't provide is, here's a cost, right?
Right,
'Cause
understood.
they're all building to that budget, and I think having done this a couple of different ways in other districts, I mean, the size of this project, I don't think, myself or anybody else in the district can say, hey, yeah, we need this many desks and this many classrooms and all this, and oh, by the way, we need this many teachers' desks. And our offices have to be designed as such, A, because you lose total coordination of syncing up that look that you want to be consistent throughout. And B, the reason you can't just design it and write the spec and then we open it up to everybody for numbers. Well, they design it to their spec and their line and they get first priority and they're gonna win all the other business. And so you're better off having them work toward a total number so that they're the ones having to make some considerations or bringing it back to us for consideration as to, yep, this will work, this will fit budget, or, this might be a consideration you want to consider, but it's going to cost you a little more, or if you need to save money, this is what you could do to save some dollars. And so I think that's what it gets to. As far as the companies involved, I think the four that we interviewed have all worked with a number of school districts. Each one had a number of large districts that they've worked with and done work on. Most of them had a very similar approach. Most of them were saying that, the design and coordination was built into the cost of the furniture. There was one company that said, yep, we have this many hours allotted for design and this many hours allotted for basically coordination. And then it's this amount of dollars if it goes over. We don't typically charge that, but in the materials that they shared, it was there. And so, that makes you pause a little. I think there were different approaches to installation. Some had it just built in and some frankly said, hey, when it gets to installation, we're gonna bid this out and then we'll show you those numbers so that the installation cost we're charging as part of the project is what it is. And that we've looked at other companies or to do that. Now, most all of those companies had internal components that then coordinate that. So they're not just like, hey, we've just handed this off to installer X, right? They have on-site people. Now, if they are just handing it off to installer X, that becomes a concern. And so there was, a lot of that conversation. I don't know how many of this board were here at that time. The closest thing I can compare it to is when the board interviewed way back when in however many years ago it is now, 2017 or 2016, when we interviewed architects and contractors. You didn't have a lot to go on other than what was their book of business, what was their recommendations, and how did they interview? And that's probably the closest thing to this that I've done.
Mike, I hear you saying you want a list of the vendors and then maybe a description of why this was the best interview?
Yeah,
Because it sounds like everybody agrees that this was the best interview and this is who they want to go with. You just want some of that.
Yeah, kind of the same thing we've seen for everything else, even the not building related stuff. Usually there's a template you guys fill out that, like, let's say for Joe and Todd here have brought like this testing service, these are the services we considered, these why, this is our recommendation.
Yeah, and we can do that.
You want that before this vote?
I
Or just
I'd
as
prefer to table
follow-up
this
data?
vote to the next meeting, so I can see that, but
If we
What
table
time?
this vote, what does that do for timeline and design, and is that pushing us back?
Yes, it's pushing it back at least, 2 weeks until the next one. But I don't think it's critical. We have communicated out to all of the vendors that we were making a decision tonight. That can be changed by communicating back out that the decision wasn't made tonight. You know, and from a vendor standpoint, they want to be on as soon as possible because they have a lot to do. But all of those things can be managed over a couple-week period. So, no, I think that realistically, it would be great if they could be on tonight, but also at the end of this project, we probably won't feel the 2 weeks that we lost. So that's kind of the reality of it.
Having been
Table
through,
this until next week.
well, I was gonna say, having been through the architect process, I guess I'm struggling to know what I'm gonna see that's gonna make me feel any less confident in the recommendation we're being given from those who did all the interviews. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to tabling it, but I also don't know what's gonna change in my mind because I'm not gonna be going through those interviews. I don't know that I'm necessarily gonna know what I'm looking for reading, if you're looking to read all the documents, And if we decide to table, that's fine, I don't know what's gonna change for me seeing that. And so if you can help guide what I'd be looking for, but they've done the work and I'm like, we're paying them to guide us through this, and if their recommendation is Demco, then I guess I'm comfortable with that. I think what we're thinking maybe is through the lens of, could there be cost savings? And I'm hearing, no, it's 1.25 million, it's just gonna, who's gonna do the work the best? It sounds to me like we're not comparing a number. It's gonna all look the same. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we're all working. Anyone we would hire would work within the constraints of that budget.
Constraints of the budget
Yeah.
and design it all and fill it. So, I don't know.
I'll just add, I hear your concern, Mike, and I think just optically for me, that's why I was struggling to understand why every one of the processes felt a certain way and then this one felt a bit different. But I do feel like I understand the difference now, and I think the questions that you're posing, I think they've been largely answered for me in the discussion here. And so asking them to format that, the only difference is if you could name who the other vendors were, but honestly, at this point, I don't need to see that, so I'd be comfortable moving it forward tonight.
I mean, I could probably rattle them off the top of my head. I don't have my documents in front of me, but just for documentation, so Demco, Henriksen, sorry, I'm sharing this.
EBI.
Yeah, those were the two finalists, were Demco and Henriksen. The interviewed other ones were EBI.
Which is Emmons.
Emmons, yeah, sorry, I'm using acronyms. It was Atmosphere, and it was.
That was the four.
Was that the four? That was the four. And then there was Creative Business Interiors, also known as CBI. They responded. And then there was.
Marshfield Book and Stationery.
Marshfield Book and Stationery responded. Is that it? That responded?
There was one more. Not a company I've ever worked with or knew.
Oh,
They were out of
yes,
Minnesota.
Yes, it was Meteor. Meteor responded. And then we had two that did not respond. And one's local, and I can't remember, Ron, what their name was. I had never worked with them before.
That was, I don't know, would have been
Anderson?
Alexander, probably businesses.
Alexander, okay. And there was one more, and I am spacing it. Oh, it was Laerdal. Laerdal was the one that did not respond. So that was the group that we had.
What's the scope? Is it they design, they manufacture and provide furniture, delivered to the school site,
Installed.
installed?
And then maintain the warranty period.
Okay.
They don't all manufacture. Many of them have the exact same line of vendors. So whether it's Han, All Steel, Verco, Steelcase, yeah, you go down the line of.
So they design, they provide the
Procure,
product, they
yeah.
deliver to the site, they install as necessary.
And then
Desks and chairs in this room would get dirty kind of thing.
Yeah, and the unique thing about Demco over the rest of them is that they also have a manufacturing wing too. So they have, all the other ones have like a a stack of vendors, kind of a silo of vendors that they work with. They have that, but they also, in addition to, have their own brand that they manufacture.
Is there any difference in warranty from one vendor to the other? Demco have a better warranty.
Usually the warranty is a manufacturer warranty, so they're all using the same brands, so it comes from the brand.
So similar to some of the bids where we've seen efficiency because we picked the same concrete for this or concrete or those, we'll find those efficiencies by having one design, build, manufacture, install, warranty.
It would be very challenging to say if we tasked PRA with designing the furniture for this, it could be incredibly challenging just because if they spec one thing and the selected vendor doesn't have that, and all of a sudden we're looking for an alternate, but the red is a little bit different, and all of a sudden now this chair doesn't match that chair, and it's a kind of a ball of yarn that pulling on that, and that's why this usually goes in this way for something of this size.
Yeah, and I don't wanna pick on architects who aren't in the room, but I know Ryan shared, the design for another thing. Oftentimes, the architects aren't designing the furniture itself, and they don't have an expertise in the furniture itself. So whatever most expensive product that gave them a little icon that they can insert into their plans becomes, that becomes your spec, right? And where the vendors, furniture line and vendors, they all had 50+ lines that they dealt with, right? And so most of them had many of the Wisconsin vendors are manufacturers as product lines. Some talked about that more than others. I know we try to be local. There's not a Monroe manufacturer, but I mean, there are Wisconsin companies that do some of it. Demco themselves are Madison-based, and so that came into it a little bit, but not, that wasn't a defining factor. Most of them all have a Madison office, but I mean, Demco is headquartered out of Madison.
So look at Mike, I hear what you're saying, and I think
So
you
based
should.
on that discussion combined with the rest, I'm fine now. The things that were missing in detail, I think have come out over the course of the discussion. Local, they're based out of Madison, right? You've done the interviews, we heard very detailed the process, who the companies were. Yeah, I'm good now.
And I will let you know, this process has started again with environmental branding. So a company that would help make a cohesive branding throughout the building. And when we come back with that recommendation, lessons learned. So we will have some, details about, at least in short, if not in print. To be completely honest, I am more comfortable with putting our recommendations and reason why we wouldn't go with someone in your packet so that you could read it instead of saying it out loud. And so we could do that. We could, yeah, for sure. And so when we get to that process, which would probably be maybe towards the end of September, if not early October, then we'll make sure that we have some vendor, some notes beside it and that kind of thing so that you guys have that ahead of time so that you've reviewed that.
Will there be any collaboration between environmental branding, did you call that, and furniture? Because I think, to me, the furniture and the branding is really important as to how the school looks.
Yeah, I agree with that too, and it'll be interesting to see what responses we get back and how they want to work with that. And I think that usually branding agencies gather lots of information, including everything from the architect, things about the local environment, things about from the school and the hometown and all of those things. And probably some of the questions they would want is like full set of plans. How are things developing? What's this room gonna look like? What's this area gonna look like? Is there a rendering? Yeah, those type of things so that they can work together. But hopefully we'll have some really great information coming up for you guys on that one.
We've been through Sun Prairie West. They did a really good job of, you can't hardly go through a wing of that building without seeing some type of branding involved. And they also have a lot on their furniture, I know.
You didn't have another chair?
No,
So yeah, if there's other comments or discussions, we can looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So I heard, I have a motion by Jim and a second by Nikki to approve Demco as the furniture services vendor as presented by the team. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are on to the high school building update. So obviously, we did some bid package 4, 3 parts of that tonight. We'll do the rest of it the next meeting or the meeting after, which one?
There'll probably be some parts in the next meeting, and we might have to talk about the potential of a special meeting depending on how things start meting out as Tony and the crew gets through the bids. So that stuff is coming. It's coming in the next few weeks for sure. Yep.
And I will turn it over to you to do an update. So you can update us on the high school.
So bid package 5 is out right now, and it's due, is it next week?
Not next week. Yeah, next Friday, I believe. Yes,
So,
next Friday.
so due next Friday, so bid pack 5, and that is the last bid package. So we are expecting in the next week or so in the near future, we're expecting to get back some of the HVAC pricing that we have that's getting worked on right now. So that'll be coming to the board in the near future, okay? The rest of the construction trailers are gonna be placed, I heard, it's gonna be possibly the week after Labor Day.
Yeah, we pushed to the week after Labor Day. So that's when we'll have, basically, we'll have a few trailers set up. We'll have a double wide trailer for the main office group from CG Schmidt. The trailer we're in right now will be pulled over to that same location, more closer to the high school, and that'll be Huffman Keel's trailer. They'll operate out of that one.
I will say it's a Huffman Keel's district / board / Monroe High School trailer. It's there for owner meetings. So we look at the owner very broadly, but will be sitting in there most often? It's probably us, but you guys are more than invited.
Yeah, and then we'll have probably a Connex for storage and for the concrete work that's gonna be starting. So that's kind of the next thing on the horizon is we're shooting for concrete start, mobilize on the 9th of September. We're on track for that right now, so it's exciting to see some new trades starting out there instead of just dirt work. So
That's putting the foundations.
It'll be a big change and it'll be really fun to watch.
Yeah. So, another quick thing too, and we'll go through some video footage we have when I'm done here in a minute, but the civil engineer is engaged. He's completing the things that he needs to do for the survey for the future roadway that's gonna go across north side. So, right now, we're trying to get the proper registered CMS that's out there, the survey that's out there, certified survey map. So anyway, they're working on that right now for that access from the north. We are looking at the GMP, guaranteed maximum price. We're looking at that. We're aiming for the second meeting in September, but I think realistically, we're more likely looking for early October, I think, to get the GMP done for the project. And then, as mentioned, we may need to schedule a special board meeting as Huffman Keel and CG Schmidt get through the bid pack 4 information. We had 3 sections today that we discussed, but there are many, many sections, and there'll be different groupings. So some of those will be able to get grouped together, and some of them will have to stand alone. So depending on what that looks like, and we're gonna estimate time on it and things like that in presentation discussion, we may have to call a special board meeting. Chandra, did you send out a doodle poll? You didn't send anything out yet on that, did you? Okay, so what we'll do is once we have that, and we have a meeting on Wednesday, we'll get a doodle poll out if that's something that we have to look at. So we do have some things to show here. Jen, I don't know if you have these queued up. We did share, there is a sheet which will go on the website, and this is produced by one of the interns that's working for CG Schmidt right now. So Tyler Matley put this together with some pictures. Jen, do you have that or not? And it's just basically with some progress to date. So blasting was done 2 weeks ago. Disking and drying is continuing. Bid pack 4 we talked about, and then continued site grading we know is going on. A lot has happened in the last week on the earthwork over there. Next 2 weeks is establish the trailer pad, which we also talked about. And we have some utility blasting scheduled potentially for the first week in September. And then temporary power to the trailers and bid pack 5 being out. And then under his fun fact section, he's got over 800 holes were drilled for the gymnasium blasting. The holes were then filled with explosives and then they were ignited and they blasted through the rock. So we do have some other things here. So there's the construction update. That'll go up on the website under information, update information after the board meeting tonight. So it'll go on sometime tomorrow or Wednesday. And then there's just pictures of the site with some descriptions and some of the things I just read. Jen, do you have access to the filtered blast? If you just want to show that real quick. Do you have that? So this was a shot of the blast that was done 2 weeks ago. I believe Carl Kramer shot this from the side, obviously a safe distance away. So that's where they were blasting through the rock, which is going to represent that kind of that northeast corner of the gym. Just a real short, like whatever, 7-8 seconds, and countdown and ignition. So. And then the last thing that we wanted to show was a copy of 2 of the sets of drone footage that have been shot in comparison. They're shot from month to month. So this is July 17th on the site.
Jen's managed her music. I had my music on mine.
That's Todd on the guitar. And then here's a month later. And then what Tony was arranging was for some time for myself to go out and go through with Ryan Hughes. He would go out with his GPS. He'd mark some certain points to show me where they are. So if I take some people out there, I'll be able to take them and say, okay, this is where the football field starts. This is the bottom corner of the gym. This is where the tennis courts are. This is where the center area of the baseball, softball diamond is. So we'll be able to designate those spots and I'll be able to tell you exactly where they are. Well, within a foot or so probably with the GPS. So
I'd say that I was out there this afternoon before coming here and it looks way different than that. It's starting to drastically take shape. I mean, you can see the slope to where the bleachers are gonna be for the football field. You can see the gym excavation. It's pretty much benched down to pretty close to subgrade right now. You can kind of see I drove on the road that kind of goes around. It's really starting to take shape, and I think when you do that with Ryan, you'll start to see a lot of the things that we've been looking at the drawings for forever actually coming to life. So it looks a lot different than both of those, actually.
yeah, we could even maybe take out some of the local media if they were interested. Okay. So those are all the things that are going on right now.
You guys give us a little update on schedule. I mean, I know you said putting some foundations are starting soon, which is really, really good. I assume you wanted to start them sooner than now because it's Wisconsin and winter approaches very quickly and that needs to happen before winter, so.
We actually did have a date of September 16th, so we pushed it up to the 9th. So we were gaining a little bit of time there because we were able to get some of that blasting coordinated, and there was also a construction bulletin with a little bit of changes that needed to be approved. That was crucial in getting the schedule to accelerate a little bit for the blasting because it's kind of like the next thing in line. So yeah, after that it's structure. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be starting in the southwest corner of the building, which is kind of like the tech ed department / administration area. And then we work east towards the gymnasium. And then around, it's just counterclockwise, auditorium, and then finish on the northwest side of the building. And the last thing we'll do is the commons right down the middle. So that's kind of the sequence we've determined. We've had a few different scheduled pull sessions, we call them. You know, the schedule we issue out to bidders is pretty high level. And then we bring in the trades into a meeting, and it was last 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, I think, or a week ago this Wednesday. And, you know, we brought in all the people that are structural, the fabricator, the steel erector, the mason, the precast, the concrete, and we kind of figure out what sequence works, right? So the steel guy was like, well, I want to get on site earlier because I have a lot of work. So can we start in this area first? There's a lot of that back and forth that goes on to get buy-in to the schedule. So that's where the schedule is really developing right now in front of us. The key was to get out there and get started on concretes and foundations, because you're absolutely right. Every week that goes by now without doing concrete work is just another week of winter condition expenses and difficulties working in the winter. So we are fully aware of that and striving to hit the ground running hard. We're gonna start with actually the nice thing about where we're starting on the southwest corner is some of that's some pretty quick, straight frost walls and footings. It's a little simpler, get on site and get a rhythm before you get to the gym, which is tall retaining walls, really wide footings and tall, not really tall, but like 16 to 18 feet tall retaining walls for the gymnasium. And we need to get those tall walls up to strength, concrete strength, before we can backfill them and build the rest of the building adjacent to it. So there's a whole sequence of things that's really challenging to kind of get through, but we've gotten through most of that now and striving towards getting the structure up as soon as possible. Precast panels, the date was always set for late October. So October 26th, I believe, is when the date that we're expecting to see the first truck of precast show up. So. Is that okay on schedule?
Yeah. And for you guys to know what the next steps for us are in these meetings are, once we set a GMP and the budget's locked in, we will then once a month come and give a budget update, a monthly. Once we close out and tie out the month and get everything inputted, then we'll come in with the slide, basically giving you an overall update budget performance, so that we can let you know how we're doing financially 1 month at a time. It's kind of impossible to do it until that GMP gets locked in, but once that's locked in, then those preceding months, once a month, we'll come in and give a financial update.
That's great. Any other questions on the high school building update? Hearing none, we will move on to.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for all your work. Move on to informational items. We have boardsmanship administration.
Okay, so we have just a couple inter transfers right now. So we have Tara Greeley and Layla Hummel, that they're going to be changing positions in the middle school for different positions. We already talked about potential for a possible special meeting, but that'll be determined most likely after our Wednesday core meetings that we have on the project. Abe construction is mostly complete. There's some minor finishes that have to be done, but the building was open and available for staff late last week, and they were able to start their in-service in the building today. And we will absolutely be ready to have the kids there next Tuesday, so it's a big celebration. So schools all have open house, all the schools do on Wednesday night for students and parents. So I know most of the board members are going to be at one building or another, and I will be around, and we will have administration around to make sure that we're at different tables so that people, if they have questions or need information, we'll be there to provide that. First day of in-service was today, and students are coming in most students are coming in on September 3rd, all students on September 4th. So it is really energizing at the beginning of the school year. So there's obviously a level of excitement. There's a lot of professional friends that don't necessarily see each other in their off time when they're not working, but so there's always that quiet companionship, professional companionship, which is nice to hear. And also probably a real healthy level of anxiety, because it's really important work, and our kids are really important, and they've been working hard to make Monroe a great school district, a great place for our kids to get an education. And you can see, listening to the different reports we get from Joe and Todd, how hard everybody's been working to make this happen. So anyway, so that's kind of like my run through there. That's it.
And I guess I'll echo that. Huge thank you to everybody, but specifically the administration who probably works hardest during the summer months to prepare for the next school year. Doesn't just happen. Good school years happen because of a lot of hard work. So thank you to all of you. Huge thanks to our custodial staff who got our buildings already, our administrative assistants, everybody who's here, all of our teachers who have been prepping long before this week to be ready to teach all of our kids. So just a huge thank you to everybody for all of your work to get ready for yet another school year. Moving on to correspondence, I think there was one email that we received regarding Rainbow Childcare and the 4K partnership that FIG responded to. Other than that, Rich has not made me aware of any other correspondence. Are there committee reports? Jim?
Finance Committee met this evening prior to the board meeting to review June and July financials.
Todd has emailed me on the curriculum updates and meetings for the year, and I have not had a chance to touch base with them, but we will, and we will get our scheduled meetings set up for this coming year. Nikki?
Nothing for me?
Dylan? Eric? Mike? Sounds good. Any agenda items for future discussion?
Could we maybe, on a future meeting, because the 4K program seems to come up in our correspondences like once every 6 months. Could you put together just a brief presentation about like what the 4K program is, what the requirements are to become a partner with the school district? To hopefully avoid the, to avoid the repeating correspondences. Seems like about every year when enrollment starts, we get the same question.
Yeah, we can put together some information. We have some 4K partners, and I know I shared that information with the board already too. So you want me to bring some of that forward?
Yeah.
Okay, we can bring some of this
Just for,
forward.
during a meeting when the community is gonna see it too, so they understand what a center like Rainbow would have to do to become a partner, right? Because people keep asking us why they're not, but I've never.
The information that I shared with you, you're welcome to share out if people ask you, but we'll have some things that we can share at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Liaison reports? I know Terry is our rep for the library, so she's not here for that. Terry, you're any other 5 minutes for the press? He says none. All right, so looking for one final motion.
9:22.
I have 9:22.
So moved.
Motion by Nikki and a second by Jim. All those in favor to adjourn, by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.